Welcome back to the podcast. Really excited about this week, and thank you for tuning in. So, today we're going to talk about what I call the physics of motivation, because as I started talking about motivation, thinking through what it is, because it's kind of this abstract thing, so I want to make it something a little more hands-on. And as I went through it, it kind of just developed into a lot of like physics metaphors, not really complicated ones, very simple things that you'll know just from school or life in general, very simple things, but a lot of really good metaphors that kind of stack together. But I guess what really got me thinking is that, we talk about motivated people or being motivated in a very general sense, and we usually conflate it with like energy or focus. Like we see someone who's really excited and we're like, oh, they're motivated. And, my case and the thing I kind of want to communicate today is that it's not exactly the same thing. Motivation, energy, and focus are all different, and motivation is kind of its own thing that I think it would help us to identify exactly what it is and how we get that. Because while energy and focus and all these kinds of things kind of come out of motivation, motivation in and of itself is kind of this tricky, complicated balance. So I wanted to take this episode to talk about what is motivation, in my opinion, and how do we grow it, and how do we create motivation that can last, really importantly, and not just have a little bit of fuel for a little bit of time, but have lasting motivation that will sustain us to our goals. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's get into it. So the first analogy that I really thought was helpful was speed. And I think of motivation like speed. It's measured relative to something. Like you don't say, I'm going 65, nothing. It's 65 miles per hour. And that's how we measure speed, is it's relative. Even meters per second, miles per hour, like I said, like it's all relative. It's, you don't know how fast you're going until you look at other things and see how they're passing by. That's even something I love watching, like video essays about like movies and stuff. It's kind of a niche thing, but a lot of times when people talk about how you convey speed in a film, it's all about what you see in the background and the contrast of the thing you're looking at versus what's in the background. And you only can really understand, even though something, for example, like an airplane, if you see a video of an airplane flying at 30,000 feet, it doesn't really look like it's going that fast because it's just clouds against it. But if you see an airplane taking off, you realize how fast it is because you can see all the buildings behind it. And in the same way, I think motivation is very much measured against or relative to other things. So in the same way, motivation has to be anchored relative to a goal or an objective. And this is even the basic psychological definition of motivation, which is the desire to act in service of a goal, right? So motivation isn't just our energy or our feelings or our focus, but it's about how are we moving in service of whatever this goal is. And that's really where the rubber meets the road, because a lot of times I think, I've talked about, entrepreneurism, where, kind of our generation, especially as young people, we really just want to be like, okay, go, 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 and just be really energetic, but without a particular focus. And so I think a really easy takeaway for this idea of what are you measuring your motivation against is, rather than seeking to just be motivated for motivation's sake, seek to be motivated in service to a goal, in perspective with a milestone that you'd like to achieve. It might be fashionable to be motivated just for its own sake, but it's probably not going to get you very far. Motivation has to be anchored to a goal, anchored to a milestone, anchored to a value. There has to be something driving it, or else you're really just going to lose steam, because it's just motivation for its own sake. And again, that's why measuring motivation against a goal or a value is so important. And that's one analogy that I really found helpful. Okay. So another metaphor is inertia. Right? So basic, and it's a fancy term, but basically it means an object in motion will stay in motion, or an object at rest will stay at rest unless acted upon by an external force. So in the same way, we won't take a step toward, this is whatever, but It's similar though, because in a lot of ways we won't take a step toward a goal without sufficient motivation. Basically, there's a line. It takes a certain level of energy for us to stand up from where we're sitting and go to something new. And so, but that force of getting up from where you are and going to the next place isn't so much just, oh, I'm going to do it in motivation, whatever. It's really, a lot of it is the draw of a worthy goal. It's, a lot of that draw to get us to stand up and go somewhere new is because that thing that we're envisioning down the road is way better than where we're at right now. And that's the draw that gets us up and going. And so it's not really that until we are in pursuit of a specific goal or a specific value that we're really in the stream of motivation, in my view. And so another application then is we can get motivated by setting a worthy goal that we can actively invest into. So a potential kind of catch that I've noticed in my life and with other people around me is that kind of a snag that we run into a lot of times with motivation is we want the sensation of motivation, the feeling of being motivated, but we don't have a solid basis or goal for it. And so it's frustrating because we're like, oh, I just want to be motivated. Or I am motivated, but we a lot of times have this kind of brick wall that we run into because we want the feeling of motivation, but without a goal or a value or some sort of marker attached to it. So we're just kind of, exactly like an airplane, we're just gliding and we're just cruising because we don't have anything relative to us help us understand where we are and what we're going to. Right, and especially, like I was saying, I think today there's a big push to be, to be busy. And this is something I've posted about before, is I forget who said it. He said, in our culture, being busy is kind of like an award. We wear it proudly. When people ask us, oh, how are you? We say, oh, I'm busy. And that's like an achievement. When you're busy, when you can say, oh man, I'm just swamped, that's an achievement. And I think a lot of this, it comes kind of to the same point, right? Is that we want to be, motivation and busyness a lot of times are perceived to be hand in hand, but that's not really the case. You can be motivated toward a great goal, but not be busy, or not feel busy. Because you can, being busy mentally and being busy, in your schedule are two different things, but that's a different talk. I'm trying to figure out how exactly I want to say it. So coming back to that, I would just encourage you to, when maybe you're feeling like you're comparing yourself to other people, or thinking through these things about motivation and goals and all that stuff, don't measure so much your busyness and your focus and your energy against other people. Measure the goal, right? Because there are a lot of us are going to work toward goals, really hard toward goals that don't even matter, and a lot of us are going to work toward goals part-time that really do matter, right? And so the balance is, in my view, the balance is finding a goal that's worth it and spending the amount of time that is commensurate with achieving that goal. So here's an example, right? If you want to, be a professional football player, it's going to take a lot of work to achieve that. It is actually going to require hours and hours and hours and hours and just absolute pinpoint focus on that goal. It's going to require that because it's a big goal, and that's a great goal. But it is going to require a lot. By comparison, though, if you look at, you say, hey, I want to be a financial planner, that's going to take a lot of effort, but probably not as much as being a pro football player. And so you can have the same level of focus, but it might not require the same maybe amount of work or the same amount of hours. And that's not the problem, though. But a lot of times we feel like it is, oh, I'm not ambitious enough. But it's if you have a goal and you have it locked in and you know what you're, at least have a vision of how you need to achieve it, then the motivation is really just getting up and moving toward that goal. And it's not so much about, oh, it's the biggest, grandest, most incredible vision. It's great to have big dreams, but there are some, there's some dreams that aren't like the dream. They're just like some, like, hey, I want to pay off my debt, or hey, I want to buy a house, and like kind of smaller ambitions that don't have to be incredibly huge. They just have to be, what they are, And so a lot of times it's just reconciling how much work do I need to be doing for this goal, and what is the goal anyway that I'm going after. I think this is part of what I'm trying to get at also, is because a lot of times for me, when I'm maybe just hanging out or resting, whatever, and I kind of get the feeling in the back of my head, I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about, is like, oh, I'm not, I should be working on something right now, or I should be, hustling toward this goal because, no days off and all this stuff. And, but, and there's a lot of, that's kind of a topic that I talk about a lot, and there's a lot of ways to go at that. But I think that ties into this conversation of motivation, because a lot of times when we, how do I say, when we feel like we need to be doing more, it's not because we're trying to achieve a goal. It's because we want to feel like we're doing enough. And we want to be fulfilled by that feeling of working. And because sometimes the feeling of working is what we want more than the feeling of achievement. Sometimes we just want to be working on something. It doesn't even matter if we ever actually reach the finish line. It's just the feeling of making progress that's so huge for us. But again, my encouragement there, though, is like, know that your goal is not going to fulfill you. And so you don't have to be, that's not your fulfillment. And so a lot of times I think when we, overexert ourselves, because there are some goals that, hey, you have to exert yourself a lot for, and that's fine, But when we overexert ourselves for what is called for, a lot of times, in my view, it's because we want to feel like we're doing something important. But there's really two problems there. The first problem is make sure that you're really doing something important and something that matters, and pursuing a goal that's worth pursuing. And then second of all, separating your identity from that goal, and know that if you don't reach that goal, or you don't reach it as fast as you want or in the way that you want, that was never going to fulfill you in the first place, and that's not your identity, and it shouldn't be. And I think it's just very tempting a lot of times to, not write down on paper, my identity is my work, or my identity is this goal. We don't write it down on paper, but it's much more sneaky than that. But anyway, that is a whole nother podcast episode, and I've kind of mentioned that before, but that's something I'm really interested in talking about, especially with my generation, because I think we suffer distinctly from that. But to wrap up about motivation, though, I really, really do like this idea, though, that motivation is about action relative to a goal. It's not just your goal is amazing or your actions are amazing. It's the two working in tandem. We're motivated when we have a great goal and we have great opportunities to get there. At least when we can identify opportunities. We're motivated when we say, this is what I mean. We're motivated when we say, here's this goal and here are ways that I can achieve it. Because then we understand the actions that are relative to the goal. And that's motivating, right? And so my challenge, my application with this podcast, I think, is set goals that are worth going after and go after them in a way that makes sense. And that is in line with your values, honestly. Because I would say definitely that your values supersede your goals, and honestly that your values dictate your goals. And that's a whole nother podcast too. But just understanding, though, that motivation isn't this, make or break characteristic that we have to well up in ourselves, but it's all about, hey, what is valuable to us and what are we going after? And that's where the rubber meets the road. It's not so binary where either you're super motivated or you're not motivated at all. It's really all about what is the goal, what is the thing at hand. And I think, the encouragement there is that if you don't feel like if you feel like sometimes you see all these people are like hyper motivated and you're like, I don't know where this comes from, just think for yourself, hey, what's a goal that I would really like put a lot of things on pause for to really go hard after? And that's I think that's a way that we kind of find what motivates us and what will be motivational. And I think that's where we get that energy and that focus that I was talking about at the beginning. So that's all for this week. I really hope that made sense. And then that gives you something to chew on this week. To really think about this week, what am I working toward? How am I working toward it? And is it worth it? That's the big question for me with goals is this even worth it? And I think that's something that's huge that we really need to think about is, hey, is this goal worth it to me? So I would really challenge you to think about those things this week and identify where your goals and your energy and your focus and your priorities and all these things intersect. And I think we touched on a couple like kind of subtopics of this that I'm really interested to get into with more podcasts in terms of your values and how your values inform your goals and all this kind of stuff. So really exciting. Honestly, that was not scripted. So that was really good to hear. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, whatever it is. Also, I think I mentioned it before, but I'll say it again. The website is up. It's kind of a simple homepage sort of thing, but if you want to check it out, I have a little bit more information on what the podcast is, who it's for, and what it's going to be. So if you'd like to check it out, it's www.tburtis.com. So go check it out there if you like. I have like a new listener page and all kinds of things to try and help communicate what the podcast is about and why I started it. So thank you for watching and listening. Be sure to share it if you thought that this was useful. Comment me, DM me, whatever it is. If you have any thoughts, comments, if you disagree with me, please let me know. And I'm always happy to do Q&A and take that input. So thank you for watching. Have a great week. See you.